Welcome back, you guys. I hope you had another great weekend. We're excited about today. We're talking about creativity and how it can either hinder or help your productivity. So, Ruben, why don't we talk a little bit about what you think is going to help your creativity, and then we'll talk about some things that are going to actually stifle or ruin your creativity.
Excellent. Should we start by the positive or negative?
Let's talk about the negative first.
The negative. All right.
Yeah.
So everything we're going to share here today, it's our own experience, and we're based. All these this channel is based on things that we have lived and we have found out that it works for us, and
Exactly.
we want to share with you. So,
Yeah.
personally, I found out that interesting that since I was a kid, my parents never had a TV at home.
Yeah.
You know that?
Yeah,
Did you
yeah.
have a TV at home?
Not really, no.
So not criticizing who has the TV,
Yeah.
but it really was a creativity enhancer in this case.
What's
right?
interesting for us is we as kids we never had TV, but then as we got older and we kind of got into our teenage years, then we did.
You did it.
And I noticed a shift. Yeah, but
know.
anyways, continue. Yeah.
Interesting
Yeah.
because we lived in Uruguay, South America.
Yeah.
And I remember that my parents didn't want us to have a TV. We as kids always say, "Oh, I want to have a TV, a TV, TV."
Want to be like everybody else?
Always saying, right?
Yeah.
But they chose not to.
Yeah.
One of the reasons was because they believed that creativity could be somehow hindered or destroyed with that.
Right.
Why? We'll go over it very quickly in a bit. But before that is when I got to, I earned some money with my brother. I remember that.
Yeah.
And we had this money and we wanted to buy it. And my parents said, listen, are you sure you want to buy this TV? And we said, yeah, it's time to buy it. It's time to buy it. But then they said, why don't you buy a TV, buy something else? At the time, another friend introduced me to ham radio. Ham radio at that time was a big thing, right?
Yes,
Remember?
yes.
Not now with the
No,
internet.
but back then.
And
yeah.
somehow I chose to buy the ham radio. It was the best thing. It
It's
was
the
so
best
much
choice of
fun
your life.
because instead of the TV, we bought the ham radio.
Yeah.
But then we left over some money and we bought a little small TV. It was black and white, very small, but like a radio, a stereo with a TV, right?
Yeah.
And we start watching this and that. You know what? My brother and I, like a year after, said this is not for us.
Right.
We left it away. Why? Because this consumption of serial content that you don't have the time to actually critically don't have the time to process critical thinking.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Is-
So explain. I'm gonna let you finish your thought. Explain the difference between, because those are two great analogies. The difference between a TV and a ham radio.
There you go.
Because obviously they're two totally different things. But how do they work in engaging your brain? Like, what's the difference there?
Right, because when you have a TV, you are consuming like drinking a cup of water, right?
Yeah.
Just going through it, right? And when you drink a cup of water, you're not thinking actually what's happening. And the same thing is happening with what you're hearing, what you're watching on a TV, because you're not really thinking what's happening. You're consuming it, right?
Yeah.
It's going through your brain. And studies have shown that the frontal lobe is essential for critical thinking.
Right.
So in the central lobe, you think, oh, is it right? Is it wrong? Is he telling the truth? Not telling the truth? Is it actually something that I should continue to investigate? And usually, especially movies that are high into a lot of special effects and a lot
Emotions.
about getting your attention at
Yeah.
any cost,
Yeah.
which you do an incredible job.
Yeah, they do
That's
amazing
why
job.
it's
Yeah.
so popular, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So these contents, they want to have your full attention.
Yeah.
And the full attention means you don't get to have any critical thinking.
Right.
So if you don't have a critical thinking, you might watch one movie or two, but if your life is just watching movies, just watching TV, I guarantee you that you're going to have at least slightly your creativity slightly destroyed.
Right. Let's talk about routines then. So, something that I've noticed too is if you get into, because that's one aspect of it. The other one is if you get your life into too thick of a routine, it can be good routines, because we talked about good routines in our lives, right? It could be something as simple as, every morning I do XYZ, then I go to work. I spend X amount of hours at work, 8, 10 hours, whatever. And I do similar things at work. And but the work is engaging and busy and so forth, and I have to use my brain for that, which is good, which is opposite to what you were just talking about with disconnecting, right? But it's focused on that task, and then when that's over, I go home, I play with my kids, and then the day's done, and I go to bed, right? And when you have that routine, it doesn't allow any opportunity in there, any moment in there for creativity or creative thinking or getting outside of that box. How do you feel about that?
Exactly. It's a thin line, right? We had already an episode about habits.
Yeah.
So we're not contradicting ourselves.
No.
We're just saying there's a thin line. There are habits that you have to put and structure your life with to achieve discipline.
Yeah.
That discipline will allow you to achieve results. Okay?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
those are good pillars that you go through the day, but not necessarily have the same day always the same way every day.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
If you have something that you repeat day after day after day, you're limiting yourself because you're not exposing to new stories of your life.
Yeah.
If you think about your brain, is just like a battery of memories,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, it
Because
is.
if you don't have memories, Misha,
Yeah.
who are you?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
your memories could be a bunch of ongoing similarities, always the same thing,
Yep.
or could be a lot of diversity.
Yep.
Right? Diversity. If you have diversity in your memory, you'll be a more of a. It looks like you're more of a bigger person because you have more life that you have lived through, right?
Exactly.
So that is enhancing the neuropaths in your brain
Yeah.
to think differently and to gain new skills, to gain new interests, to be curious about things, right?
Yeah.
We'll talk about curiosity.
Yeah, and something that I found for my own life, with my wife Amy, is I'll get into these routines where I'll be busy at work, and I'll go through my day, and then we'll get home, have dinner and whatever, and then all of a sudden the evening comes, and we don't have much to talk about. We've talked about the typical stuff. How was your day? I was good. What'd you do? I did this. And then you get into the evening, and instead of, because we don't own a TV, it's just a choice for us. And so, for us, it's time to engage with each other and, spend time and connect and so forth. And a lot of the time, if we've been too engrossed in our routine, we'll sit there in the evening and think about, what do we have to talk about, right? All of a sudden, the conversation is dying, and you're like, oh, this isn't, I didn't sign up for this. What's going on, right? But then the interesting thing that we notice is all it takes is for us to get out of that routine, go for a drive, like a road trip is ideal for us, right? And so we go on a long road trip, we go visit her grandparents or something, and all of a sudden this 5-hour drive, because we're in a new environment, we're seeing new things, we're sensing new things, everything's different than our usual routine. All of a sudden we have a million things to talk about. We can talk for 5 hours straight, and we have new ideas. We think about our life differently, because now all of a sudden you have perspective as well. And I think you want to talk about culture. We'll talk about that in a second. You have all of a sudden a different perspective on the life that you normally live, and you say, hey, wait a second, there's something I don't like about that normal routine, that normal life. And both Amy and I have found that we've made critical life decisions on things like that, just on a drive or something, right? Because we step out of our norm and we say, you know what, I don't like the way I do this, or I'm doing this too much, or whatever, and we say, you know what, I'm going to cut that out of my life, or I'm going to change this, or I want to do this more, or whatever. And we've had the ability, because of that creative thinking now, to expand on those thoughts and say, hey, I want to do this new thing. Right?
Because you gave yourself a condition that was out of routine, that your brain was looking at different things. You know that human beings thrive for difference.
Yeah.
And it has to be also a balance, because if it's very unpredictable, everything changes, you get very unstable, right? But if you do the same thing all over and over and again, life is boring, right?
Exactly.
So that's the thin line. But as you said, you put yourself in a different setting, in a different time, a different geography, different landscape, and all of a sudden, I'm not doing my routine like a robot, but now I see things that stimulate my critical thinking, right?
Exactly.
And you were talking about culture. I think that a big enhancer of creativity is to expose yourself to different cultures.
Yeah, because you travel a lot, right? And
Yes.
you consider yourself to be a very creative person.
I like to be creative, right?
Yeah.
At least I like to be creative.
Yeah.
And if you like to be creative, you probably are creative, because you are living a creative life, right?
Exactly.
So you're always searching for new things and ways to do new things on existing tasks and looking for new opportunities.
And it gives you new perspective, because when you see different cultures, everybody does things in different ways.
Yeah.
And so now it creates curiosity. And you were talking earlier about how you love curiosity. How is something made? Why do people do this? What how do you make money here? All these different things. What kind of lifestyle do you live, and what kind of food do you eat? How do you cook it? All this kind of stuff. Creativity is driven by interest and curiosity, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's so many things that I've learned in life that comes from very simple people and simple situations.
Yeah.
Like, let's suppose this table is really well done, beautiful table. I have no idea how to do a table, right?
Yeah.
But the first time I look at this table, if I'm in front of you, they have made this table, I have a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Seriously, I have a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
How do you cut this? How do you treat the wood? What wood is it? Why is this wood? Why would we different wood? So all these questions are just feeding your brain that will train you
Yep.
to see a different world and
Yeah.
to see more opportunities. Now, putting this into perspective also, by the way, before that, just about cultures,
Yeah.
remember when we went around the world and saw different cultures and we're changing every day?
Yeah.
And we said we'd lived a life in 3 months, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We felt
Why
that
did
way.
we live a life in 3 months? Because the difference was so intense
Yeah.
that then you had an experience of memory that made you just being fed creativity all the time.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. And it was like drinking from a fire hose, right?
Exactly, right?
Because there was so much exposure to new culture and creativity, or to differences, that it was actually overwhelming.
Yeah.
I'm
It was too
not-
much for us.
I'm
right?
not suggesting.
No, in
I'm
that
not
case, it was too
suggesting
much.
that as
Yeah.
a regular thing, but it was an interesting experiment, anyways.
It was an interesting experiment,
Yeah,
exactly. That
exactly.
took to the limit of, man, my life can be different. Right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
in that trip, you and I took some decisions that actually were interesting for not a major change of our lives, but did steer some things in our lives. You know,
did,
and
yeah.
that's why, because we exposed ourselves to a very different situation.
Yeah,
right, went
exactly.
out of our routine.
Yeah.
So just also about cultures, and we were talking about the different countries.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in India, things are done so differently, right?
Yeah.
And you get a chance of looking at that person's life and why is he doing this way? Why is he expressing just the facial expressions and how they react, right?
mannerisms,
In India,
yeah.
actually, there's a lot of mimes. You say mimes or mimes or
Mimes.
mimes, right? In internet,
Memes.
memes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
memes, right? In internet about how the Indians move their head, right?
Yes, yes.
But it's cultural, because now you see, probably a no is when he's doing this is not exactly a no, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we're saying this very, very respectfully, but
Yes.
all culturally say when you see do this, it's not a no. It's not a no. It's an affirmation. So
Yes.
you see, there's different
See,
angles.
I'm going yes like this, and they go like this, right?
No.
It's for them. It's a totally cultural difference.
So if you
right?
expose yourself to that situation, it makes you think and act in different ways, and a lot of this stuff is unconscious. It
Yes.
will be later,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's like a muscle, right? You train a muscle, and then you become better on it,
Yeah.
and you become better on it because you feed a system that will make you just progress on that. Creativity is fed through enhancers and destroyers, right?
And perspective is an interesting one, because everything that we just talked about is all about perspective. Because now I don't view a different culture and say, I can't believe they do it this way. You view a culture and go, wow,
Yeah.
they're doing it this way, right? And it's a different way of framing. And so that perspective in understanding different cultures and the way that people do things, I think enhances our creativity and allows us to be more creative in our thinking. Now, let's shift to why creativity is important for productivity and for business in general. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a great example.
Okay.
A great example, a guy that was really creative. I think it was you. Okay, so share a little bit about the story, the creativity, why creativity was so important for your business, and how did you actually apply it, and you thought out of the box.
Yeah.
Because then from your case study, we can think and give some hints for people to apply in their own businesses.
Sure.
and
Yeah,
lives,
yeah.
right?
So it was interesting. I had an idea that I wanted to make videos. I've loved making videos since I was really young, and film them, edit them, whatever. And I wanted a place to put them out there. And I thought, it'd be really fun to be a YouTuber. And that fed a creative side of my personality, right? I feel like I'm a creative person, but I get stifled a lot just in routine, like we talked about, right? And we're talking about our own life experiences. And so I was in a position where I felt, you know what? I love my job. I love what I do, but I'm feeling like I'm in too much of a routine. I want some creativity. And so I decided to start this YouTube channel and just make videos about what I do. And it was this creative outlet for me, right? And what ended up happening was that ended up fueling the business and actually giving people a window into what we do, right? The flying that we do and stuff like that. And in a roundabout way, it wasn't intentional to begin with, but
It wasn't intentional?
No, it wasn't
So you didn't
intentional.
think like, oh, let me be creative to change
No.
my business.
No, but what's interesting is I look back at it now, hindsight is 2020, and I can see how that creativity, if I wish I was creative enough to think about it to begin with, right? How that creativity all of a sudden was one of the most differentiating things about our business, right?
There you go.
We were the only
Impacted.
school that I knew of that was creating content in such a way and putting it out there for the world, and that was very different. We weren't all of a sudden creating promotional videos or ads or banner ads on Facebook or whatever. We were creating a really different experience for people to actually see through the window of our company and see what we do on a daily basis, right? So
Because if you think about a helicopter company or a helicopter training school, you don't think like you're a media company, right? You're not a media company.
No,
right?
exactly.
But all of a sudden, you became a media company as well, right?
In a way, yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
And it was because of your creativity mindset. You said you didn't do it on purpose,
Yeah.
but it was because you were trained to be creative. And again, we talked about little things that came from our early days.
Yeah.
And I think that your creativity was enhanced throughout life, that later you applied it because it was just the modus operandi of yourself. You do it that way, so you think out of the box.
Yeah.
And you're prepared to do different things out of the routine. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting actually with kids. They've done studies. Kids that go to school a little bit later and are given more freedom in their younger years. Let's say they don't go to school until they're 7 or even 8 or
Right.
something like that, right? And they have more freedom of their time, maybe guided a little bit, but more freedom of their time to do creative things, whatever they feel that is, right? They excel far more in school and then in life in general.
I believe that.
Because it really develops, that first 8 years of life is where you really develop your creativity the most. And when people are going to school at 5 years old or 6 years old or something,
Kind of boxed.
it goes
right?
into a box
Yeah.
because you go into a funnel or a system that says you need to do this topic for this amount of hours, this topic for this amount, and it puts you in this box where you don't have the ability as much to think on your own, think of what you'd like to do and create like kids do, right? It's amazing watching a kid, and I have a son that's 2.5 years old, and it's interesting to watch his own personality and creativity come out. And he starts, creating things, and you think, oh, how'd you
Right.
come up with that? I never taught you
By
that,
himself, right?
And he's coming up with it on his own, right? As opposed to.
But
just
you know how
mimicking,
he's
right?
creating that? He's creating that because you don't actually keep track of that, but you're exposing him to situations that he's observing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's by observation that we apply our own acts, right?
Yeah.
We observe, and then creativity is building something that didn't exist, but actually it did exist because you are building on top of existence.
Sure,
Right?
yeah.
And if you feed yourself with good facts and
Yeah.
good nurture, right? And we didn't talk about that, but there's a lot of ways that you can, also inhibit your creativity other than just watching TV, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
If you don't exercise, your creativity is going to be diminished
Yeah.
because circulation is essential for the brain, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you create, whenever I want to make a good decision, not a decision of yes or no, it's let me find a solution for my business in
Yeah.
a certain way. You know what I do?
You were running.
I go running, right?
Yeah.
Because I go running, and so people might find me running at any time, like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, even if I already did my exercise.
Yeah.
Because I think, no, it's good time to run. Let's go run. If I go run, right, I'll be oxygenized. My brain will be oxygenized, so I can think, oh, you know what? I never finish a run that is more than 30, 45 minutes
Yeah.
without some type of solution. Might be not the best solution.
Yeah, yeah.
But I found out, oh, I didn't think about this one.
Yeah, yeah.
This is probably a way to go, right?
Exactly.
I'm not saying it's a perfect one, but I didn't have that idea before. Why? Because you are just stimulating that circulation in the brain, more oxygenized because of the blood flow,
Yeah.
and you're going to be just enhancing that creativity.
Exactly. Yeah. And in the business world, what makes a company stand apart is their ability to do things differently than their competitors, right?
Right. It's so
And
competitive.
Everything is so competitive nowadays, and so if all you're doing is the same thing that your competition is doing, you're not standing out, right? But there's extreme outliers that do things completely different, and people look at them and go, "Wow, that is so incredible! I wish I could do that." Right? It's because the people in those companies are spending time deliberately being outside of the box, creative thinking. Google's a decent example, right? Decent example in the sense that they're a massive global company, and they've done really incredible things, obviously.
I think they have like 20 or 30% of the time of their employees. They actually Tell them not to do the routine.
Exactly.
To think out
Don't
of
do
the box.
your work. Do anything you
Gmail,
want. Right?
Gmail started this
Gmail
way.
came that way.
There are other things they can-
AdSense came.
Yeah,
Google
exactly.
AdSense came that way, right? And so it's a company's. It's sort of in their DNA that they've created ability for people to be creative, to have their own time, their own space. Yeah, you're at work, but take 2 hours out of your day and do something that you want to do. Anything you choose. It's up to you, right?
That's a good, also a very good example. In our lives, we should actually schedule creativity.
Yes, exactly. And in a previous video, you talked about how you spend sometimes 2 hours a day learning new things.
Exactly.
And we got some feedback from people going, "Wow, that's amazing! He spends 2 hours a day learning new things." Well, that could be in a whole variety of ways, right? You could be listening to a podcast, watching a YouTube video, whatever.
Reading.
And reading. There's a whole slew of ways you can do it. And watching a YouTube video can be purely for the sake of consumption. I'm watching this
Right.
creator,
Some funny
it's
thing,
just funny and whatever,
yeah.
or it can be for the sake of learning something. I'm kind of on the fine line because I watch certain content creators that are giving me mostly just content, right? I could sit there and consume and not actually be thinking about it. But the way that I consume it is, wow, look at that technique. Look at that transition,
Exactly.
the way he did
You
that
pay
transition,
attention
right?
to
Look at
the
that
things,
intro. How did he cut that? How did he edit this, right? Why is the music going quieter here and more, louder there? What kind of emphasis does that have, right? And so I'm watching it from that perspective because to me that matters, right? Whereas somebody else could watch that exact same video, they could flatline and it would not be useful and productive for their creativity, right? So I think we've touched a lot of different topics today. I think the critical things are allow yourself time in your day or in your routine to
Get out of the routine.
step outside the box, step outside your routine, and start looking for ways. And there's books that talk about this as well and stuff like that. Start looking for ways to increase your creativity because that will increase your productivity. You don't necessarily need to be spending more hours on something to be more productive at it. You need to be more creative in the way that you spend those hours, and then the result is going to be absolutely incredible. I think. Yeah.
Let's get creative.
Yeah, let's get creative, guys.
Do something different.
Yeah.
Which will pay off for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I love the conversation. It was great. It was nice to be back in person again. It was really great to be with Ruben again. If you guys like this video, please do us a couple things. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you guys haven't already. And we're going to talk to you on next Monday. See ya.